Hello guys, this is Candidate Master Coach Abel from Club Level Chess. In today's video, I'm going to show you the top 10 checkmate types that could occur in a game of chess. Let's check out how many of the checkmates you know from this top 10. I'm gonna dive straight into the video without further details. The first checkmate type is false mate. It is the fastest checkmate pattern that can occur in a game of chess, and it could happen in just 2 moves. Let's start this one. It starts with f3, e6, g4, queen h4 checkmate. In just 2 moves, now white has nowhere to go. The king cannot go anywhere. This happened because of the f pawn. We should never push the f pawn, as the name implies. Are you thinking of pushing f pawn? Forget about it, as the name implies. This is the second type of checkmate, just another false mate. It could start with e4, f6, knight c3, g5, queen h5. Mind this f pawn. It's happened because of the f pawn. This is called false mate. The second type of checkmate is colors mate. It's also this one is also a second fastest checkmate. It could happen in just 4 moves. Let us see this colors mate. It starts with e4, e5, bishop c4, knight c6, queen h5, knight f6, and queen takes h7 checkmate. Now the king cannot go anywhere. Colors mate happens by attacking the weak f-pawn with a bishop and a queen, and the f-pawn is considered weak, this weak pawn, and it's only defended by the king, and now the king cannot take the queen. For this reason, there are many kinds of opening traps that are aimed at the f7 pawn. This is a second example of colors mate. This time the queen is f3 instead of h4, and is again targeting this pawn. Now the queen can take this pawn and it's going to be checkmate. The king cannot escape anywhere. This is called scholar's mate. The third type is back rank checkmate. It's a checkmate delivered by a rook or a queen along the opponent's back rank. Now the king is unable to move because the king is gonna blocked by its own pieces and he cannot go anywhere. Let's see this example. The queen is gonna take this rook. Black rook takes back the queen and rook takes. Now the king is checkmated. We call this back rank checkmate. Example of back rank checkmate. This rook goes from b1 to b8 and give checkmate. The king nowhere to go for the king. We call this back rank checkmate. The fourth kind of mate is called Arabian mate. In Arabian mate, the knight and the rook team up to trap the opposing king on the corner of the board. The rook sits in a square adjacent to the king, both to prevent the escape along the diagonal and to deliver checkmate, while the knight protects the rook on h7 and it also prevents the escaping square of the king on g8. The rook will go to h7 and it's gonna be checkmate. We call this checkmate Arabian checkmate. This is a second example of Arabian checkmate. Again, the knight and the rook team up to give a check to the white king. The black rook goes from g8 to g1 and give a checkmate. We call this Arabian checkmate. The fifth kind of checkmate is called Boden's mate. Boden's mate is a checkmate pattern in chess that's characterized by the bishops on 2 crisscrossing diagonals with possible flight square taken by his own pieces, like the rook and the pawn are here blocking the king somehow, and these 2 bishops crisscrossed and the king has nowhere to go. We call this checkmate type Boden's checkmate. This is a second type of Boden's checkmate. Again, this bishop is giving a check to the king. The escaping squares is taken, somehow blocked by the queen and the knight. We call this checkmate pattern Boden's checkmate. The sixth kind of checkmate is called smothered mate. Smothered mate is a checkmate delivered by a knight in which the mated king is unable to move because he is completely surrounded by its own pieces and the king can not literally move here. Here in this position, the knight from d6 goes to f7 and now the king cannot go anywhere, blocked by his own pieces. We call this checkmate smothered checkmate. This is a second kind of smothered checkmate. Here also the knight gives a check to the king and the bishop cannot also take the knight because of the queen pinning the king. This is another kind of smothered checkmate. The seventh kind of checkmate is called epaulette mate. Epaulette mate is a checkmate where two parallel retreating squares of the king are taken by his own pieces. Here the rooks are blocking the escaping square of the king. The queen from b1 goes to g6 and the king cannot go anywhere. We call this checkmate epaulette mate. This is the second example of epaulette mate from another direction, but the position is still the same, only the position changed. This is called epaulette mate. The eighth type of mate is ladder mate. I believe almost all chess players know this ladder mate because it almost most of the time happens. This ladder mate is a checkmate by two major pieces. Major pieces means that the queen or the rook. It could be with two queens, with two rooks, or one rook and a queen. They work together to score the king to the corner. They're going to take the king to one side of the board and give a checkmate like this. We call this ladder checkmate. This is the second example of ladder mate. The idea is still the same. We're going to score the king to the corner by giving here we give a check on c7. The king can only go down. We're taking the king to the corner, and next with the rook we give a checkmate. This is a ladder checkmate. The ninth checkmate type is called Anastasia's mate. In Anastasia's mate, the knight and the rook team up to trap the opposing king between the side of the board on one side and a friendly or his own pieces on the other side. Here, the rook gives a check and this knight is controlling the escaping square of g8 and g6, so the king cannot go anywhere. We call this Anastasia's mate. Anastasia's mate can be achieved also with a knight and a bishop. Let's say if there is a bishop here on f7, it could do the same job like the knight, and it could also be Anastasia's mate this way. This is called Anastasia's mate. This is another example of Anastasia's mate. The knight still controls the two key squares, escaping squares, and the rooks from d8 goes to d1, and it's gonna be a checkmate. The king cannot go anywhere. This is another kind of Anastasia's mate. The last but not the least checkmate type is called opera mate. Opera mate is a checkmate pattern that was demonstrated by the famous Paul Morphy while he was watching opera show in Paris. That's why it's called opera mate. Before this final position, Paul Morphy sacrificed his queen and win his opponent in a style. There the bishop and the rook team up and give a checkmate here on d8. The king cannot go anywhere. We call this opera mate. This is a second type of opera mate that could happen here after pushing this. Only the rook can take. Now after taking this, rook gonna give a check here on b8, and when the knight takes, the rook will take, and it's a checkmate. It's a checkmate combination by a rook and a bishop, hence developed by Paul Morphy while he was watching a Paris show in Paris in 1858. It's stunning. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.